Let's start at number 50. Johnny Gaudreau averaging a point per game after the All-Star break this year. 20 points in the final 20 games each.
Yeah, and from the great state of New Jersey, ladies and gentlemen. So we got to have Johnny Gaudreau in the mix there. Fun to watch. Obviously a very elusive player, a lot like Patrick Kane, I guess, smaller guy, gets in and out of traffic. You mentioned the points as the season went on. He did get better as the season went along. I don't think it was his best season, and I think that in Calgary there's a lot of discussion about if they need to make some changes to their group, and is Johnny Gaudreau one of those guys they need to move out. But still, if they do move him, he's going to bring back something significant in return because he's still a heck of a player.
He is. He certainly is. He's been captivating fans and viewers since he stepped foot on the NHL ice. I mean, he is one of those guys. He is unique. He's he's been doing it from day one. My thing with him, I like the placement here where he is because he's a bubble guy on this list for me. But I want to also say this about him is that he's the type of player that leaves you wanting a little bit more, where I wouldn't be surprised if he has a big bang-out year. This guy could be a top 25 guy. You know what I mean? Like, that's the potential. So I think there's some guys on this list that might be like, oh, that guy's a little low, or maybe that guy's not even on the list. Here's one of the prime examples of a guy who could just rocket right up the list because he's that good.
And, you know, in his career, you mentioned a point per game over 20 games.
Yep.
He's almost a point per game in his entire career. He's a little bit below that. So he's a guy that's put up a lot of offense in his career in this league.
All right, much like you said with Johnny Gaudreau, this next guy, Zach Werenski at 49, he's another guy who next year he could be in the top 25. You just don't know. Led all defensemen in scoring this year with 20 goals.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his goals, his assists. I mean, his clutch ability with the Columbus Blue Jackets is the biggest thing. But the biggest thing for me with this guy is his adaptability. And what I mean by that is when Zach Werenski and John Tortorella first came together, I was a little concerned how that relationship would go. Torts pushed him, and you know what he did? He responded the right way. He grabs, when he gets challenged, Zach Werenski steps up. He's a gamer. And I think we're seeing a better Werenski every single year. And I think that's because he's been adaptive. And he's growing with that. And it also helps when you have a teammate like Seth Jones taking some of the pressure off you as well.
Yeah, and, you know, he's one of those guys that can play in all situations. He can play big minutes. He can play against the best players on other teams. And, you know, there aren't a lot of guys like that. I mean, that's why defensemen, for me, are really important. I would have more defensemen on my list than we have on our top 50 list, just because I think they impact winning more. And certainly a guy like Zach Werenski does that. He's matured in his career, and 20 goals. He is scoring more from the blue than I thought he would. So he's definitely a guy that helps you win.
Yeah, and more defensemen coming up in the next 60 minutes on our countdown show. I just want more abilities because you had clutch ability, adaptability. You were dropping all abilities there for Zach Werenski.
Billy Bob ability right here.
And he's got
got
ability to grow a heck of a stash up on that big screen there.
Absolutely. Let's start at number 48, Max Pacioretty, coming off one of his better years. Maybe of change of scenery, Vegas, whatever's working out there, it seems to be working for him at the age of 31, coming off his best points per game of his career.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit of a blend of new scenery, and with the team he has a nice structured team around him where he doesn't have to be the guy every night. But you can see in his goal total with 32 of this past season, he's very capable of being that. And I'll tell you one thing, I did a shoot with him out there in Vegas. His shot, when you see it up close and personal, his release is incredible. And you know he can always shoot the puck. He's a threat from all over the ice, and that's very good for Vegas to have a guy like that that can change a game with one shot. So Pacioretty having that breakout year, I'm not really surprised. But, you know, you could argue that he's a bubble guy on this list. That's probably why he is where he is on the list.
Yeah, you know, I completely agree with you, Rupper. I mean, here's a guy that's been in the league a long time. He's 32 years of age. But he changes places. He gets into a situation where there's a lot more offensive players around him. And all of a sudden, he is just one of this kind of ensemble cast in Las Vegas. And he really played well in that circumstance. So the numbers are up. I don't know if I would have him on my list of 50 players. When I look at his entire career and where he's at, he's always been a very good player. He was a captain in Montreal. But for me, I think the numbers this year are more of an indication that he's playing with good players.
And just to piggyback off that, too, and I think this goes a long way with players, is when he was in Montreal, Montreal was not winning unless Max Pacioretty was scoring. That's not the case in Vegas, and that takes a lot of pressure off a guy.
You mentioned Pacioretty and his shot release. I'll put this next guy up with anybody's shot release in the NHL. Patrick Laine at number 47. We know he can score. Coming off a career high, 35 assists. Is his game becoming a little more well-rounded right now?
Well, perhaps. I mean, I think he would be wise to try to push that into his game, the ability to pass the puck a little bit more often, because we know he can shoot. He's a real he's come into this league as a big, strong shooter. He's a one-dimensional guy. He's a guy that scores. He can score from distance, which is something that's really important in this league. But again, the numbers have the goal numbers have gone backwards a little bit. 17-18, he had 44 goals. Now 28 goals, now a few less games because we had the shutdown, and so he played fewer games than in that season when he scored 44. But he is a terrific player. He can score goals. He's still very young, only 22 years of age. His name has been out there in trade circumstances because maybe looking for a different fit than Winnipeg. But, boy, if you're the Jets, this is a tricky guy to think about giving up on because he can score.
Yeah, I know. He has the world-class ability to put the puck in the net. I'm not going to second-guess that at all. It's hard for me to rally around Patrick Laine necessarily being on this list because just as a player, he just leaves you wanting more. And you can say that about a lot of guys, and a lot of guys that's a compliment because they show you such great skill. This guy, I just don't feel like the effort's always there. So here's one where, yes, he is on the list, but I think with that talent level he has, he should be a lot higher. And I think that's where this dilemma is in Winnipeg. We have to make some moves here into some decisions. Is he a part of this future or is he not? And if a team's willing or potentially willing to walk away from a guy who can score 40 goals, I think that's your answer.
Rupper, quick. You're a big player in this league. You're 6'5", 6'6". He's 6'5". Do guys that are big like you, is there a thought that they can always do more no matter what they do in this league?
Yeah, I think that's a big part about it, but I also think that there's something to the optics of effort as well. And I think a lot of times you say big guys that they move slow because they're big, long legs, and I think that's the case with him. That's the case with Jack Eichel at times, too. But he does fly,
He's
and
a gazelle.
it is different. So,
like
I think that that's part of it. So, it's a little bit... That's the catch-22 with a player like Patrick Laine.
Yeah.
All right. Let's start with Quinn Hughes out there for the Vancouver Canucks. Incredible rookie regular season. But how about this guy? 16 points in 17 playoff games each.
Yeah, he is really finding his way in the National Hockey League. I think the best thing he did was stay in school for that extra year because he's not the biggest guy. He gave himself a chance to mature and grow into the player that he has become. And wow, what a player he is right now. We're going to take a look at just some of the things that make Quinn Hughes so special. And just his skating ability is fantastic. The footwork there, he just makes it look like a lot of the guys we're going to talk about, they just make it look too easy. And, you know how it is, Rupper, playing in the league. It shouldn't be this easy. I mean, just watch the footwork.
No, I mean, legs feed the wolf, each. They do. I mean, the legs are everything for Quinn Hughes' game. He does it on a nightly basis. His ability to exit his own zone, and get up in the rush is incredible, and then be able to get back and defend as well.
Yeah, and that was a really nicely defended play by Ryan Suter, and he still was able to get the puck through. Again, a little backhand sauce pass there, and you're in the zone. This play is ridiculous. I mean, he spins away, walks the line, and fires. And again, for the viewers at home, just watch the footwork and what's going on there to get that shot off.
He's thinking he's thinking a play ahead, and I think that's a big thing. He not only thinks a play ahead, his legs are already getting him there ahead of the defender. So he's fun to watch. Deception,
another big part of his game. You see it there on this play. You take another look against the Islanders. Just kind of a little bit of a look the other way, holds onto the puck, and then an accurate shot off the post and in. And then reaction, Rupert, it's priceless.
Yeah, just watching it up ice, give a little check up. Oh, but he just looks up and is like, well, that's a good way to end it there.
No big deal.
Nice try.
Geometry 101 at University of Michigan. Just learning the bank pass.
Oh, beautiful.
The big thing for me with a guy like Quinn Hughes also is you have a team in the Vancouver Canucks and a lot of teams in the NHL. When you have an abundance of skill and young, youthful legs up front as forwards, it's completely irrelevant unless you have a defenseman that can connect the dots.
Right.
And it's so big. It doesn't matter. You can have a team of Jack Eichel, Connor McDavid, all these. You've got to have a guy connect the dots from the back end.
Get them the
That's
puck.
what he does for this team. All the offense, they help each other. Don't get me wrong. The forwards of the Vancouver Canucks help him as well. But those guys, Elias Pettersson doesn't have the season he had without 43 on the back.
And just a quick story about Quinn Hughes from the World Championships. He was being coached there by Jeff Blashill and by Danny Bilesma for Team USA. And Coach Bilesma told me that during the tournament on the bench, Patrick Kane was looking back over and say, hey, get me out with Quinn Hughes. And that was before he ever got to the National Hockey League. So that should tell you something about this kid's just his skill.
There's a compliment right there. And that's why he checks in at number 46 on our list. At number 45, no slouch on the back end either, Miro Heiskanen. We talked about the postseason Quinn Hughes had. How about 26 points for Miro Heiskanen? Fourth most in NHL postseason history for a defenseman. Some of those names, Paul Coffey, Brian Leetch, Al McInnes. Ever heard of them?
Yeah, I've heard of them, and I've seen them all play, and they're all really good, and so is this kid right here. For me, he would be a top 30 player in the league right now. So he'd be way further up on my list than he is on this list. And when you watch this tape, Rupper, again, this is almost ultra effortless. It reminds me a lot of Scott Niedermayer, who was, I mean, you hate to compare anybody to the great Scott Niedermayer because he was such an unbelievable player. But Miro Heiskanen, just like, look at this. He just gets over, bumps the guy off, gets the puck. I've got it, no problem. Again here, gets the puck. He's in the right spot. He's loping up the ice. Perfect tape-to-tape pass. Jumps in, and all of a sudden, the ice in front of him.
No, you know what I love about it, Each, too, is that we're starting to see the offensive side of it now. And JMO, you already mentioned 26 points in the return to play in the playoffs. We know the offensive side, but we can get a whole rack of videos with his defensive shutdowns because of his skating ability. You mentioned Scott Niedermayer. Miro Heiskanen shuts down plays before they even start.
Yep.
A lot of defensemen, you want that confrontation zone at your own blue line. Like, you don't want to let a guy gain your zone. He'll squash that play at the offensive blue line, his offensive blue line, because he's so good of a skater. He challenges the other team's forward to say, hey, listen, I'm going to be up in your face. I'm going to knock this puck away before you even get control of it. And if I don't, I guarantee you I beat you back to my net. And I love the way he plays. This guy's a stud. It's not, for me, it's not about if he wins a Norris, it's how many he's going to win.
Yeah,
Ooh, I like that.
Gap control is great. Great stick. Just a terrific player.
All right, so 46-45 at number 44, Chucky Brightlights in Boston. Charlie McAvoy taking over the lion's share of minutes there from Big Z. McAvoy has led the Bruins in time on ice the last 2 years. Prior to that, the last 12 seasons, Zdeno Chara. So this guy now plays a huge role for Boston.
We all know who did they partner with him when he first broke into the league? Zdeno Chara. Yeah. Big man, show him the way, and I love it. Now he's ready to take that over. And you mentioned he has taken over that time on ice. But I think with the departure of Torrey Krug, we get him on this list where he's at now, and I think it's just going to get higher. You know why? Because he's going to have more and more on his plate, and he can handle it. And the best thing about him, Each, that I love about him, don't let the baby face fool you. He'll hit you, and you'll feel it. Yeah. And I love that about Charlie McAvoy. I love his game. He's got an all-around great game.
Yeah, a New York kid from Long Beach, New York, so happy to see that kid from the New York metropolitan area where I grew up. But, you know, you mentioned about he'll step up, and it reminds me, I saw him in a World Junior Showcase several years back. I was in Michigan watching it right against the glass, and the Canada-U.S. game, so the guys are hyped up, and Lawson Krause was playing for Team Canada, who's a big guy.
Big boy, yeah.
He came through the middle of the ice. Charlie McAvoy stood him up and just laid him out. And, you know, fortunately for Logan Krause, he was okay, but it took him a few minutes to get up because it was that kind of hit. So to your point, Charlie McAvoy, he's got a lot of natural ability, a lot of offensive ability, but he doesn't mind mixing it up physically either.
And I don't think we've seen the peak of his offensive numbers yet. I mean, those numbers that he has aren't necessarily going to blow you away necessarily, especially with some of these other guys that are on the list.
Right.
But with the power play time vacant now, with Torrey Krug being gone, there might be more opportunity there, and you might see those numbers go up.
It's funny because you see Hughes and you see Heiskanen, and those guys are just 21. McAvoy feels like he's been in the league for 15 years now at this point. He's only 23.
Yeah.
Future certainly bright on the back end in Boston. You take a look at our top 50 players right now the last 4 years and what they've done. Look at that. We have 12 on the list this year. 5 of those are 23 and younger. 3 of those checking in right there. So the future bright in the league and the youth movement in full effect, especially on the blue line in our top 50. This guy, number 43, used to play with them, Chris Letang. Not many defensemen are asked to do what Chris Letang is asked to do in Pittsburgh. Why not?
Because they're not able to do it, a lot of guys. You know, I think that's a big thing. Is when I think about Chris Letang, and you know, I try to look at it. I'm trying not to be partial from seeing him on a daily basis. He is such a special player. I don't think he ever gets his full due. And what I mean by that is there's a handful of defensemen in this league that are asked to do what he does. And I'm going to name a few of them. Mark Giordano, he has to be the best shutdown guy on his team defensively, and he's got to drive offense. Victor Hedman's another one. Roman Yossi's another one. Chris Letang falls in that category, and of those other three guys I mentioned, they all won Norris trophies. So the point is, we put a lot of onus on the ability to drive offense and defensive play from a defenseman. He can do it. I'm not saying Chris Letang's ever going to win in Norris, but he does something special and unique that not many defensemen can do in this league.
I think won a couple of cups, and he's a big reason why.
Yeah, I think he probably just gets overshadowed because he plays with the two big guys there, right? Malkin and Crosby, and they take up a lot of the oxygen in the room there. And people don't realize sometimes the impact that Chris Letang has. In fact, when you go back to the year they beat the San Jose Sharks in the final and won the Stanley Cup, I thought he should have been the Conn Smythe Trophy winner that year. I thought he drove things so much for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But again, to your point, there are some big stars that have been playing in that city for a long time. He's been a piece of the puzzle, but I would argue like you, he is a pretty big piece of things, and still over 25, nearly 26 minutes a game. Yeah. A big part of the equation for the Penguins.
You mentioned, 15 years ago since drafted?
Drafted in 2005.
15 years ago, and we see this great class of young defensemen that have great skating ability. Well, this guy used to, I remember back I was there in 2009, 10, but I think even prior to that, he would challenge teammates. He would skate backwards a full lap for them to skate forwards a full lap. And from what I heard, through the great tales, no one could beat him.
Wow.
No one could beat him. From a dead stop, I'm backwards, you're forwards, let's go. This guy can skate the best.
Let's start with 42, shall we? And we had Matthew Barzal, a guy that has all the talent in the world, but maybe the last couple of years not asked to do so much more offensively as opposed to round out his 200-foot game. Still checking in our top 50. Do you like him?
I do like him. He's worth the price of admission. You want to watch this guy. Every time he touches the puck, every night does spectacular things. The problem for me is that sometimes he tries to do spectacular things too often. And it's about, the NHL is about consistency. It's about stability in the way you play your game on both sides of the puck. And I think he needs to rely a little bit more on that in his game. But I did say earlier, when you talk about guys leaving you one a little bit more, and there's going to be some really talented guys on this list that have that ceiling of the unknown, this is the prime example for me. Matthew Barzal could potentially be a top 10 pick, a top 10 on this list. Yeah. He's just not there for me now. And elite talent, elite. It's a process. It's coming along. He's working at it. But we saw some things even in the postseason that he's got to get out of his game. He can't rely on trying to draw fans out of the seat. He's so good with the puck. He's so fun to watch. Yeah,
just 23 years old, too, so there's plenty of time for Matthew Barzal. But he is a unique talent. He's such a skilled player, so much fun to watch with the puck on his stick, a great offensive player. And what the Islanders are trying to do, led by head coach Barry Trotz, is trying to incorporate more of a 200-foot type game into his game, which will take some time. But, there are no perfect players. There are almost none throughout the history of this game. Matthew Barzal has such unique offensive ability. I think the Islanders, over time, will have to realize that, hey, let's take the good. We have to live with some of the stuff that's not so good. And I think in particular against Tampa, when they really focused on him, Matthew had to move the puck and do some things, and he didn't do it. But it was a great learning experience for him. We will see. I'm really looking forward to when we get playing again to what the next step is going to be for Matthew Barzal, because the sky is the limit because of that unique offensive skill.
And I think is that the Islanders know that his ceiling on the offense, the things he's good at, he is very good at. We want to run with that. We want him to run with it.
Right.
But the bigger thing for me in his game, he's never going to be a Selke guy like Patrice Bergeron. He's got to, get that area rounded out of his game, but it's about being calculated on the offensive side. Don't, be calculated in your plays. There's a possession in the playoffs, where they had I think they pulled the goalie and he came in the zone and he was forcing offensive plays, which, what that does? That limits offensive zone time. Make the play when it's there and do the spectacular things when they present themselves.
His career path reminds me a little bit of Steve Yzerman. Because what a wonderful offensive player Yzerman was for the Red Wings early on. But as his career got longer, he got better at the two-way game, particularly when Scotty Bowman got there. Steve had already known a lot of those things, and he really blossomed even into a better player. I think Barzal has the ability for that if he's willing to incorporate those other elements into the thing.
Not a bad projected path, right?
Not a bad path. Not a bad path.
I think most players would take that.
Yeah.
If Matt Barzal wants to look at somebody who has a well-rounded 200-foot game, look no further than number 41, Sean Couturier, coming off his first Selke Trophy win of his career. He's been a finalist before, and finally it comes to fruition for him. Gritty might be outside the door right now because we have him at 41. Yeah. Is that a fair ranking for the guy that has so much of his game where it needs to be right now and impacts Philly so much?
I might have Sean Couturier a little higher on my list just because, again, for me, the first criteria is how do you impact winning? And Sean Couturier plays a vital position, center. He plays against the toughest centers and the most offensively talented centers in hockey, and he is able to not only stop them defensively, but he's able to provide offense, too. You see the numbers, 22 goals, 37 assists. So, for me, Sean Couturier is someone that you can really build your group around, and you can play him in all situations, and that helps you win.
Yeah, it does. And when you talk about a guy like Sean Couturier, and I want to bring this back around and bring in the Matthew Barzal conversation, because this is a really nice comparable. Sean Couturier is nowhere near the skill level of Matthew Barzal. I love Matthew Barzal, but if you're winning now and need to win now, Sean Couturier gives you a better chance to win today than Matthew Barzal because of that all-around game.
Yeah.
And that's no knock to Matt Barzal. He's just not there yet.
Zero.
And Sean Couturier is older, and he's kind of learned that. And he's a skillful player, but he's not as talented as Matt Barzal, but he does those little things. Those intangibles win cups, and that's what they have in Sean Couturier.